Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is Selma, Alabama. And so we have with us to talk about this great event that occurred quite recently in the celebration of the Voting Rights Act activity in Selma, Alabama in the 1960s. And of course, Minister Taylor, you've been with us on a number of occasions and you've given us excellent information. And I'm sure that most members of our audience know you by sight. But for those few who might not know you, let's have you, first of all, to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of your experiences during this first 6 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a commercial break, and then we'll come back and talk about Selma, because I think that it's personal to you,
Yes.
because you have a personal relationship
Yes.
dealing with Selma. So let's do it from that perspective.
Okay. Dr. Haney, I was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 1955, and I am an alum of Selma University. Went to school there in Tuscaloosa, high school, elementary school, and also in Selma. When I went to school there, I worked in the Dallas County city and county schools. And we graduated from Selma University in 1980, went there in 1977, and I've learned a lot about Selma, side of Selma that a lot of people don't know. And one of the other things, Dr. Reeves Mitchell, what he has done at Fisk University with the buildings named for the people who attended there, we have done the same thing at Selma University. We are telling the story of Selma through the minds of the educators who went to school at Selma University, because the movie did not tell this side of the story. And it's very important for people to know how Selma has influenced so many areas. President Lyndon B. Johnson said he compared Selma to Appomattox, Concord, and Lexington during the Civil War. And in Alabama today, there are 10 cities that are the most dangerous places to live. And you can trace that back to Selma, because Selma has been the epicenter for a lot of things that are going on in Alabama. And I'm most passionate about having an opportunity to highlight Tony Chestnut's book, Black in Selma. Dr. J. Robert Bradley sang at Selma University in May 31st, 1966. And so the history is rich, and the people need to know, the young people need to know about all aspects of Selma, what gone into making it what it is today.
Okay, well, first let's get into some of the information in reference to the what you believe to be the historical information that you want to bring us in reference to. Start us off at what you consider to be the very, very beginning that would eventually lead 50 years later to a celebration that we had in Selma. Some information in reference to how we got there.
Okay. Well, you know, that in Tony Chestnut's book, I remember the area where they decided to go to Birmingham to seek out Dr. MLK Jr. to talk to him about using Selma as a city to launch the voters' right, you know, in Selma. And so that's what they did, brought him there. And also, Dr. Haney, I have to use this time to share that there were people who were helped by the Selma movement, and there were people who were hurt by it. And so we are highlighting all aspects of it as much as possible. Tony Chestnut's mother, Auntie, said that after the Civil Rights Movement left Selma, that it took a whole year for the kids to learn how to concentrate in the classroom again. And that's very important. And in Selma, that directly, you know, influenced my family in our developmental process of learning, you know, and there are a lot of things that happen in Selma that have influenced people who were in those classrooms that they don't even know how to put into words today. And so historically, I'm speaking from the educational perspective, the Common Core. You know, there is a Common Core that I have in Selma with those who went through various experiences during the time in the classroom in Selma.
So Selma was a difficult time for African Americans, period, which is to say that it was not that much different throughout the southern parts of the United States in a real sense, but it really sort of was a traumatic time to live and be black in Selma. Is that what you're saying?
Most definitely. And in Dr. T.J. Jemisin's book, his life story, it says it compares Selma to apartheid in South Africa back in the 60s and 50s. You know, that's in his book too.
And so when Dr. Martin Luther King and others went there, they had to face a real entrenched kind of bigotry and racism and et cetera. And this is what they had to overcome. And this is the story in a real sense of the ability to overcome that. This is the story of the celebration in a real sense of 50 years later. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I would say it is a celebration, but I won't say that they have
overcome.
Right.
Okay, very good. And so we're going to take this first commercial break.
Okay.
And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of today. We're talking to Minister Gregory Taylor from Selma, Alabama itself. And Mr. Taylor has given us some excellent information in reference to his background, education, and some of his experiences. And now, Mr. Taylor, if you could give us some information in reference to Selma before the beginning of the civil rights movement and bring us up to that period over the next 8 minutes. And then during that final 10 minutes, we'll get into the impact that it had and that brought all of these folks from all over the world to that little city at one time. And let's do it from that perspective.
Okay. And Dr. Haney, I'm telling you Selma exactly the way it was told to me. The late Dr. Owens Harvey, who was pastor of First Baptist Church in Northport, Alabama, used to always tell us that in Selma, making reference to the school, Selma University, and I told Tony Chestnut when I was reading his book, Black in Selma, that I would always count on him to tell me the story of Selma. And his son, Terry Chestnut, now, and I are keeping that tradition going. But Dr. Harvey used to say the day would come when black people in Alabama would lead that school like never before. And to make reference to the point Dr. D.V. Jemison, who was the father of Dr. T.J. Jemison, was pastor of the Tabernacle Baptist Church at the time that the things were going on there in the 60s. And his son has duplicated his ministry in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But I'm coming to where you are. In Selma, as a student at Selma University, we learned about the first classroom where the civil rights movement left from Dinkins Memorial. There's 4 ministers who led the civil rights movement out of the school into the streets. Dr. Bernard Lafayette was one of the ministers that were mentioned often in the Selma book, Black in Selma. And I've had the chance to talk to him about Selma. But there were opinions like Dr. Owens, who was president of the school. I have a history of the other side where they were saying to the protesters, you have to check yourself when you're going out protesting one day and then the next day you're going to these businesses asking them for money, you know. And I'm getting at the point here, there have been several 50th anniversaries. The 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, the 50th anniversary of the voters' right, the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And a lot of people don't know when it comes to education, I can't help but to think about May 17th, 1954, which should have been our first national education holiday, not the MLK holiday. A lot of people don't know that. So it is important for us to educate them on all aspects of Selma. And Selma is like an epicenter, like an earthquake. It's the epicenter of a lot of things that are going on in Alabama right today. There are 10 cities that are the most dangerous place to live. Selma was also like the tree ring in a tree. You know, when a tree is cut down, you can look at the circles around it and you can tell the conditions, the sunlight, the water, and all of that that the tree got. And so there's the same situation in Selma. And in the book, Black in Selma, there were civil rights activists who went into the homes of African Americans males and humiliated them in front of their families because they didn't embrace the method by which they were going about getting their rights. You know, they got all of the rights. I don't have the emotions of the 60s era, so I'm not enthused about the civil rights 50th anniversary because what happened, we lost our property as a result of the infighting. We lost our interpersonal communication skills. My mother and sisters and people who have seen my writing know I can't write. I'm a scribbler. They know this, but I identified on March 8th that our interpersonal communication skills prevented them from being able to teach me basic reading, write, and arithmetic because they lost the interpersonal communication skills. Protest, psychosis set in, and the interpersonal communication skills went into remission. And then we lost a brother, And a lot of people are uncomfortable with this, but I have the research to prove it, found it in Australia to show that my mother was carrying the son before me, that the voice of the civil rights leader, which she was keeping up with, was responsible for his at electus intracranial hemorrhage. So for me, there is nothing to celebrate about the 50th anniversary of the march until we are able to examine all aspects of it and give these kids the whole true picture so that they will be balanced today as they approach their education and get understanding of themselves. The future of education is focusing today in the area of biomedical communication and good customer service. And I just think we also, as the coverage, I saw the coverage in one of the newspapers, they have really covered Selma good. But this area that is left out, what do we do about that? You know, how do we show how that is connected to today? There's a common thread running from Tuscaloosa. And also, Dr. Haney, I went to Selma University against my mother and father's will. They did not want me to go there. But in 1992, on visiting Selma University, I found in the Selma University Chronicle an article by L. Wilkins, PhD, and she said when the civil rights movement left Selma, it left a schism, it left a lack of spiritualness, a moral decay, and a confusion that affected the families, the schools, and the churches. And that's still in Selma today. And one of the oldest ministers, Dr. C.A. Ladd, who died at 99 and 7 months old, told me that the spirit of Selma, the civil rights movement, moves from church to church in Selma like it's a whirlwind. This is a gentleman who lived there, saw 30 years before, 30 years doing, and 30 years after. That's right, that was his story, Dr. C.A. Ladd. And at the end of his life, I was able to comfort him by getting him Dr. J. Robert Bradley's music to listen to. And Dr. Bradley, as I said earlier, sang there on May 31st, 1955. And his singing was being done in the college campuses to diffuse racial tension and create positive relationship among the races. And what troubles me, Dr. Haney, it seemed to me this side, no one wants to be known. They don't want people to hear.
Yeah, that side of Selma. It didn't all start with walking across the bridge.
That's right.
But the thing about it, though, Brother Taylor, is that the walking across the bridge and the reaction to walking across the bridge sort of demonstrated in a silent way what must have happened for folks to get out on a bridge and to be confronted by the authorities and to give, in a real sense, to even challenge the authority. Something had to happen to propel that.
Excellent point. And this is one of the things I talked to one of my elders that's from Selma University about. Congressman John Lewis is perpetuating this idea about MLK, the father of the new America. That's not true. MLK is not the father of the new America, and that stuff that they've been perpetuating. I never forget, a chief of police in Atlanta told me that if the civil rights movement was an anchor, that's negative. If it was a rudder, that's positive. But what it appears to me today, after witnessing that 50th anniversary down there, it appears that they've been perpetuating it as a rudder, but it's really they had in mind for it to be an anchor. And now it has missed the opportunity to be an anchor and a rudder.
And so what we're going to do, Mr. Taylor, is to take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Minister Gregory Taylor. He's given us some information in reference to the early history of Selma, and as well as some additional information leading up to the celebration of the 50th anniversary, dealing with an activity leading toward black folks trying to vote or to exercise the suffrage in Selma and throughout the state of Alabama. So let's pick up from that perspective. I mean, the real cause of the march was that Africans were denied the right, their 15th Amendment rights, and this is the way I understand it, denied their 15th Amendment right to vote. And so the protest was eventually led through the driving force of getting Africans into the ballot box. And so let's talk about it from that perspective.
Okay. Dr. Haney, first of all, I was delighted to see President Obama there. I believe he's the first sitting president to actually speak from the bridge. A lot of the others were vice presidents who had always gone down. And following that, I think Governor Hunt, not Brentley, but Riley, Governor Riley was one of the first governors, I believe, to walk with the people across the bridge. And I have always watched that bridge ceremony very closely. And I remember one of the times when I first saw Dr. Harold Carter walking across the bridge. He's one of the sons of Selma and that type of thing. But seeing President Obama there, it was very encouraging to me to help us to get past that period. Randy Williams on WHPP radio in Selma, he has a quote to say around Selma that say they still on the bridge. You know, it's something about the bridge. I even had one preacher one time, we had a difference of opinion one time, and he sent me a postcard with a picture of the Edmonds Pettus Bridge on it, you know. And I sent him a postcard back of Chief Red Cloud of the Guadalupe Indians. But anyway, the point is, it's a great history. President Johnson said, compared it to Appomattox, Concord, and Lexington. And that's the most, depressing time in April and all of the Civil War.